Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Adorkable Anarchist World. Today is Sunday, August 24th, 2014. You're watching this on the Voluntary Virtues Network, and before I go on to what the title of the video suggests, I just want to say it has been just wonderful getting back into really writing again recently. I mean, I really have taken a break from writing things, and the thing is, like, I have a huge notepad full of ideas that, like, I never really built off of because I never really got around to writing them down. And I'll tell you, since I decided to try and put a flowing narrative to it all, it's kind of like playing connect the dots with characters. Like, I already have a lot of the dots out there, but the characters are the ones that really connect them all into one bigger picture, and it's really fun just to do that. I just thought I'd talk about that for a few seconds. So yeah, definitely go check out The Distance on Facebook. That's the project I'm currently working on, and once that script is done, I'm just gonna put this script out there for anyone for anyone to read. Like, go crazy, do whatever you want with it. Make it for all I care. Just give credit where it is due. That's all I ask. But anyways, on to the subject of today's video, which is I've been saying I was going to do this review for a while, and the reason why it took so long is because I'm not the best reader in the world. I'll firsthand admit it. For instance, I was in remedial English for a lot of my high school career, if you could call it that. And what was cool about that was the more and more I learned, the more and more I got into reading. The more and more, as much as my teacher taught me things, I taught her a lot too. And yeah, so without further ado, here's my review of The Crowd. But I just want to say this real quickly. Half of this is going to be improvised, while the other half is kind of already scripted, kind of like my review of 1984. And I'm not going to be covering everything that he discusses in The Crowd either. I'm just covering to what I think pertains to what you could call the liberty movement, but then again, everyone seems to have a different definition of whatever the movement is. So yeah, let's just start this. This is, without further ado, the review of The Crowd, a study of the popular mind, by better angle, by Gustave Le Bon. And I actually went out of my way to get a physical copy of this book because, I'm not a big fan of digital books, but if you really do like what you hear in this, you can find The Crowd out there for free. It's a fairly easy digital book to find. The only reason I did this is because I'm horrible with digital books. But this is arguably one of the most influential books in history because both Hitler and Mussolini personally read it and personally took notes from it. And after reading it, I can see why. And the thing is, apparently Dr. King also took notes from this. And while I can't say I'm 100% on anything that he says, that's still pretty amazing to see that this book is really, it's not really good or evil. It's the equivalent of having an ideological gun, basically. And what you do with that ideological gun is up to whoever is wielding it. And man, and this book, I would recommend it for those who are really into psychology and really want to learn more about the crowd in general. Like, if you have to do public speaking for a living, I would highly recommend this. It is simply the perfect book for those who are looking to get better with public speaking and how to deal with crowds. Because this is just a really good observation, and there's clearly a lot to be taken out of it. And the first thing I want to say first is this is something that often I tend to get into a lot of debates with people. But Freud is often cited the founder of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud, and I don't think that's true. I think that Gustave Le Bon, the author of this one that I'm reviewing, he really was the author here, because both Freud and his nephew Edward Bernays, they both learned things from Le Bon. They both studied Le Bon's work. Hell, Sigmund Freud's book on Crowd Psychology. The name slips my mind at the moment, but it's a direct critique of the works of Gustave Le Bon. And Edward Bernays took a lot out of the pages of Le Bon with his books, which I'm hoping to eventually get around to reviewing, Crystallizing Public Opinion and Propaganda. And after reading the book, I could totally see why they would take these types of things to learn from Le Bon. And you know, where do I start on this? Because this is, like, honestly, I'm gonna have to reread this whole thing again, because even after I've read it, I feel like I've only scraped the surface on what I could have learned from it. So this might be one of those few times I go back and reread a novel. But anyways, Le Bon believed that crowd psychology was necessary in understanding history and the nature of man. And you know, as much as I'm a guy who opposes the collective and opposes the crowd and, ooh, I don't want to be a conformist man, he's right. All of history is driven by movements which are built up of crowds, driven by ideological ideas, which eventually have led to new rulers, but we're going to look past that for the sake of this review. Now, and I want to read off, I have a few quotes from Le Bon here that I thought were really interesting, that I directly copied into my notepad here. And so I'm just going to read off this first one that I got. It is a crowd rather than isolated individuals that may be induced to run the risk of death to secure the triumph of a creed or an idea. That may be fired with enthusiasm for glory and honor. Such heroism is without a doubt somewhat unconscious, but it is of such heroism that history is made. And I'll take that as a good starting point for all this. But first things first, how did Le Bon? How does one define a crowd? Well, the way Le Bon described it is pretty straightforward. A group of individuals united by a common idea, belief, or ideology. And another thing he points out that I thought was really interesting is that crowds aren't like philosophers. They're not constantly questioning everything they hear. They will accept things at face value. A good example of this is the rise of fascism in Europe. I mean, look. There are definitely a lot of racists and whatever on the side of the fascists, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who probably were just going to that side because they didn't like what the opposition was. And, you know, this is once again, I'm going to have to reread this because it's such a hard thing to try and think about, but crowds will blindly take ideas. They really will, as long as they can sound good at face value to them. That's simply how crowds work. And the thing is, this idea that you put forward to a crowd is generally the fuel of revolutionary action. And you know, when an individual joins a crowd, something really happens. They cease to be an individual. They cease the self. The self kind of ceases to exist in a sense. And here, Le Bon actually said this best. I have this quote right here. I don't know, I wasn't looking at it. He is no longer himself, but has become an automaton who has ceased to be guided by his own will. And when you really look at crowds and what crowds are capable of, you can clearly see such things. Odessa, Ukraine is a great example of this, if you're not familiar, of the people of the Anti-Fascist League over there who were burned alive. Really, how many of those individuals of the nationalist sense would have really thought of murdering people so brutally if they weren't in a crowd? Think about it. If they were to stand back and look at the whole situation objectively, I think that you would see something totally different. I think it could also be similarly said about the 2012 elections back when I was a statist. I remember I was watching this and awestruck and how so many conservatives and mainstream Republicans I know would ignore this, but Mitt Romney supporters were known for beating up Ron Paul supporters. But then again, if they weren't a part of this crowd mentality, would they really think that such a thing would be a great way of dealing with it? Anyways, the self gets lost in the collective, as Le Bon writes once more. In a crowd, every sentiment and act is contagious, and contagious to such a degree that an individual readily sacrifices his personal interests to the collective interests. That pretty much sums up exactly what I just said. And that's the thing. You'll meet so many people who will they join these crowds, but they don't have complete interest in everything the crowd stands for. And a crowd will form with that belief backing it, with one common goal in mind, normally. In the case for Ukraine, it was to get rid of Yanukovych. And you would think that most anarchists would be able to unite under the common ground idea of, listen, we might not agree on every philosophical stance, but this one thing is the state. It's kind of our common enemy, even if we do differentiate in other areas, i.e. adjectives. Anyways, the idea that fuels a crowd then goes on to spark that common goal. I'm lost with this, but the idea that sparks that common goal rarely originates from the crowd itself. And it normally originates from an outside individual, a philosopher, a mystic, whatever the hell you want to call it. It is then the leader that comes into play, who comes and crystallizes these sorts of ideas put forward by insert philosopher's name here, and then simplifies it for the crowd. Because, as I mentioned before, crowds aren't very good with these very complex philosophical ideas. They accept things a lot more superficially. And Le Bon even points out that you have to lower the level of an idea to reach crowds. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing that, but it's very true. And I've learned this from dealing with groups of people in my everyday life. Like when you're able to simplify an idea, it's easier for people to understand it and try and work it into their own personal ideology. When you're coming at them with very complex philosophical ideas, it's more likely that they'll be more inclined to question it. And in our own case of libertarians and anarchists, we try to simplify the ideas of freedom and liberty. These are generally the types of things that we hear everyone who really speaks for this idea. This is normally the type of thing that they're trying to promote and simplify. Now, we hope these simplified ideas will catch on as a contagion and in return stimulate revolutionary action. And to a point, we're seeing that slowly coming into fruition, but I will get to that shortly. This is where the leader comes in. And I do want to say that I also want to point out there's a clear difference between a ruler and a leader. And I know there's an animation out there online that's already gone and explained this. But in short, a ruler puts himself above the crowd to rule, while a leader puts himself ahead of the crowd to guide. And, I've met people who've tried to argue that there is no difference between a leader and a ruler, but there are very, very large differences. You work in the world, and you really see the differences between a ruler and a leader. because I'm going to take my job for example here. The guy who is technically my boss, he is not a leader at all. I mean, not by any extent of the term. He's lazy. All he really does is fill out our checks and maybe occasionally bitch at someone. But there's always that one person who's good at guiding people at a job. Well, normally there is. If there's not, then why the hell are you still working there? Or who knows, maybe you're the one who's supposed to be that leader. Anyways, to continue. The leader in turn becomes a center point of unity and action. And man, that's probably a little controversial amongst most anarchists, because they don't like to hear any sort of center point or hierarchy. But the thing is, just because someone is the center point, does that really mean that they have to be the one above them? I mean, if anything, they're just the one trying to voice an idea. And here I have another quote from Le Bon. The majority of men, especially among the masses, do not possess a clear reasoned ideas on any subject whatever outside their own specialty. The leader serves as a guide, and that just fits into everything that I just said. And you know, the more I thought about this, the more I realized that there really is a dark side to this, and you can see it all throughout history. For instance, a leader really just has to go out there, and I'm going to use the Liberty Movement, or the Liberty Movement as an example. If one went out there and proclaimed that this was all being fought in the name of liberty, freedom, justice, etc., anything that follows could be justified. And that's a problem, because this gives the leader an opportunity to seize power. As a matter of fact, this is probably what almost all leaders who've eventually turned into rulers throughout history have done. And how numerous, more words from Le Bon, and how numerous are the crowds that have heroically forced deaths for beliefs, ideas, and phrases they scarcely understand. Really, I mean, how many people have went out of their way to murder for ideas that they only understood at face value? They really did not understand the larger picture of what was really going on. As I pointed out before, Odessa, the Nazis are another good, or any fascist group, for example, is a good example of that. Hell, even though Stalin supposedly didn't learn anything from this, you can still see such a thing in that. I mean, how many people died for the Bolsheviks, not realizing that they would become just as bad as anything before them? So now I'm going to pose a question that I know is going to be controversial to some. And just hear me out on this. In the case for the Liberty Movement, I'm not talking about any other movements, we're just going to say the Liberty Movement. Let's just say, I mean, is there really any sort of leadership voice? Is there really one? And you know, I took a few minutes. When I first thought about that, I had to go around and really look at a ton of videos and listen to a lot of people's podcasts. And you know, there really is no leadership voice. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that a lot more of us are becoming the leaders of our own lives. And that's the thing with the Liberty Movement. I don't want it to be one leader and one crowd listening. If anything, I think the Liberty Movement would thrive even more if it was a movement built up of those who were leaders. Because after all, you have to be the one leading your own life. That's anarchy. And yet we still need that one person who's able to simplify complex philosophical, economic, and psychological ideas. And there really isn't that sort of person out there. I mean, there are some people that you could make arguments for them being a leader of the movement, but some of them, I'm not going to name names, but they eventually, their own I'll say it like this: their own egos eventually are what turn away people from the crowd. I mean, not from the crowd, but from the movement itself. And that's all I can really say, is that I have to encourage anyone to read this book and try and become a leader of their own. If there is no one leading around you, if there is no one trying to guide the people around you, then it is up to you to be that leader. You have to be the one to take direct action in your own life. So, all in all, on the subject of this book, The Crowd, which I'm definitely going to have to go through and reread again because I only scratched the surface. If anything, if this review really didn't hit the right spot with you, there's other better videos out there. Storm Clouds Gathering, for instance, has a really good documentary about this and other things. And there's another guy who has like an 8-minute long video on Le Bon's works, and he covers it a lot better than I do. I mean, he does a way better job. But yeah, at the end, all through and through, I would give this book a I would give it a 5 out of 5. It's had a large enough impact on history, and it really is somewhat of a must-read for those who want to change the world, because it is such a well-done observation on crowd psychology that I don't know where else you would get one that could be just as good as this, aside from, and like you see all these great psychologists working off this observation, so clearly there is something there. I mean, hell, most of Edward Bernays' work is used by the government itself. Where do you think the term "we're fighting for democracy" comes from? That originated from Bernays. Alrighty then. So I thought I would close this video on a little ideological idea of mine, and I've sort of talked to it a few times with people, and but I just want to know what people generally think of this idea. Well, when I first heard the term libertarian, I didn't think of liberty. That wasn't the first thing that entered my head, but rather liberation, as in liberation of the mind, body, and soul from the world around you. Liberate yourself from the government. Liberate yourself from gods. I guess that's why I still somewhat cling to that old anarcho-socialist idea of no government, no God, or slogan of no government, no gods. And if you walk away from anything from this video, I at least want to know what you think of that idea of libertarian and liberation. So, anyways, I'm sort of reaching my end here. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this whole review, because man, this really was an interesting book. I mean, go read it. I cannot emphasize that more. If you're still watching this at this point, go read The Crowd. It is definitely a worthwhile read, even if you don't end up agreeing with everything, all of Le Bon's positions. His simple observations on crowd psychology are some of the best, and that is why I generally would consider him a great founder of modern psychology as opposed to Sigmund Freud. So anyways, reaching the end of my time here, so go check me out on Facebook at the Adorkable Anarchist World. Our like page is finally going up, which is awesome. You could also go check out my other page, Ska Libertarians, if you love ska music with those libertarian views. Or you can also go check out my other page of The Distance, where that script will be up soon. But man, I'll tell you, I expected to have that script up by this Saturday, but I've gotten so carried away with everything in it that it's like, man, did I really want to think I'd have it done that soon? Like, it's been so long ever since I've been writing that I legitimately thought I'd be able to finish this in a week, and any writer will tell you that makes no sense. Well, in the case for things like fiction, like what I'm writing. But anyways, reaching the end of my time here, so I hope some of you really enjoyed this book review, because I haven't really decided what I'm going to review next. I mean, I've said that I'm going to maybe try and review the Bible and hopefully try and get to Revelations by New Year. But with school I'm about to go to college and everything too. So I was wondering maybe if it would be easier to just try and stick to some of the easier things. For instance, I've been reading Konkin's Agorist Primer recently. I could review the New Libertarian Manifesto too. I mean, that was really, I remember when I came back from Sweden, that was really the one that crystallized that idea of total freedom for me. So who knows? We'll see what when I get around to. I mean, I have more than enough books sitting on my bookshelf right by me, some of which courtesy of Adam Kokesh. Thank you, Adam. But we'll see. There's definitely a lot of ones that I could do. So without further ado, I hope if you still made it to the end now by this point, I hope you enjoyed this review, and who knows, maybe just shoot me a recommendation, because I'd love to hear what people would like to hear more about. So anyways, this is Mitchell Wiechek of the Adorkable Anarchist World, reporting, not even reporting, trying to remain optimistic in the age of imperialism. Good day, everyone.